Emily worked as a quiet receptionist at a big luxury company in Accra. She was always polite, on time, and focused on her job. But no one really noticed her hard work. Her co-workers looked down on her because she didn't wear fancy clothes or makeup. She wore simple second-hand shoes, kept her hair tied back, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. Some of her colleagues whispered behind her back, calling her names like, the decoration, because she just sat there quietly. Others even spilled drinks near her desk on purpose, just to watch her clean it up. They laughed at her, thinking she was too plain, too poor, or too weak to stand up for herself. But Emily never reacted. She kept smiling, kept working, and never complained to anyone. Then, one morning, she walked into the office with a soft glow on her face and a simple gold necklace around her neck. Instead of admiring her, the teasing got worse. Her supervisor, who always treated her like she didn't matter, finally snapped. In front of the whole office, he tore her ID badge off and told her she should know her place. Just a few minutes later, a black luxury convoy pulled up outside. A man in a designer suit stepped out and walked straight into the office. "Where is Emily?" he asked. Everyone froze. He walked over, kissed her hand gently, and said, "I'm buying this company. And I'm firing a few pests today." The room went silent. Emily never bothered anyone. She came to work early, greeted everyone with a quiet smile, and did her job without a single complaint. But that didn't stop her co-workers from picking on her every chance they got. To them, she was just the quiet receptionist, easy to ignore, easy to mock. They laughed at her clothes, which were always neat but clearly old. Her shoes were second-hand and sometimes had tiny scratches, but she wore them proudly because they were clean and polished. Still, the others didn't care. They would glance at her feet and snicker, saying things like, "Did she dig those shoes out of the trash?" Others would loudly talk about their expensive heels or designer bags right next to her, just to make her feel small. Sometimes, when they were bored, they made her the target of their cruel jokes. One of them would accidentally drop a cup of coffee near her desk, watching as it spilled close to her bag or papers. They'd laugh and say, "Oops. You better clean that up before the boss sees it." They knew she would never complain, never fight back. She just grabbed some tissues and quietly cleaned the mess, her face calm even when her hands shook. They called her the decoration because she was always at the front desk, silent like a statue. "She's just here to make the lobby look busy," someone once said, loud enough for her to hear. Everyone laughed. Emily didn't. She never laughed with them. She just kept working, kept breathing, kept hoping. When they went out for lunch, they never invited her. When there were office celebrations, no one asked if she wanted cake or a drink. They spoke over her, around her, as if she wasn't even there. One time, when a client complimented her polite smile, one of her coworkers rolled their eyes and said, "She's just pretending to be nice. She wants tips." That hurt. But Emily still said thank you with the same gentle voice, even when her heart ached. In meetings, her opinions were ignored. If she had an idea, someone else would repeat it louder and take credit. They didn't care what she thought. To them, Emily was invisible, just a background piece. But what they didn't know was that every day she came in, she carried more strength than all of them. She had dreams. She had plans. And she had patience. So much patience. She heard every cruel word, saw every mocking glance, and felt every cold shoulder. But she never let it change her. Her silence was not weakness. It was power. While they laughed at her clothes and shoes, Emily was building something they couldn't see. Something far bigger than their small minds. They thought she was beneath them, but one day, they would look up, and see her standing far above. They just didn't know it yet. One morning, everything felt a little different. Emily walked into the office just like she always did, quiet, calm, and with her usual warm smile. But there was something new about her that day. She had a soft glow on her face, like someone carrying a quiet joy inside. Around her neck was a simple gold necklace. It wasn't too shiny or flashy. It was small and elegant, the kind of necklace that held deep meaning. She didn't say anything about it, didn't show it off, but people noticed. The moment her coworkers saw it, they couldn't help themselves. Instead of being curious or kind, they laughed even harder. "Oh look," one of them whispered loudly, "Miss Decoration finally got herself a necklace." Another chimed in, "Maybe she found it in a second-hand shop like her shoes." Their laughter filled the room, cruel and sharp. Amelie just smiled softly, touched the necklace gently, and said nothing. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain that it was a gift, something very special. It was her anniversary. Not just any anniversary, but a deeply personal one. 1 year since her husband, the man who loved her deeply, had promised her something big. And he always kept his promises. But to her co-workers, the necklace was just another reason to make fun of her. "She's trying so hard to look rich," someone joked. Another added, "What's next? A fake ring?" The jokes kept coming, louder and meaner. Some even walked by her desk and pointed, pretending to admire it before bursting into laughter. It didn't matter to them that they were laughing at something meaningful. They didn't see her glow. They only saw what they wanted to see, a quiet girl pretending to be someone she wasn't. But Amelie wasn't pretending. That morning, she took her seat like always. She answered phone calls with her usual calm voice, greeted visitors with grace, and helped her team without expecting thanks. But inside, she was counting down. She knew something they didn't. She remembered the words her husband had told her that very morning before she left home, "Today is the day. Keep your head high." While everyone else mocked her necklace, Amelie stayed silent, but her eyes sparkled with quiet confidence. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need their praise. The necklace wasn't for them, it was for her. It was a reminder of love, of strength, of promises made and kept. It was the beginning of a new chapter. They thought she was weak because she didn't fight back. They thought she was foolish because she wore something simple. They didn't understand that real value doesn't shout. It shines quietly. And that day, Amelie was shining. The office was full of fake laughter and fake people, but Amelie's smile was real. Even as the jokes kept coming, she held her head high. Because while they laughed at her, she was already steps ahead. They had no idea that their jokes were about to end. Something big was coming. And it would change everything. That day started like any other. Amelie sat quietly at her desk, answering calls, organizing papers, and smiling at guests who came through the door. Her gold necklace gently rested on her chest, a quiet symbol of something special. But to her co-workers, it was just another reason to make jokes. The teasing hadn't stopped since she walked in that morning. They whispered, laughed, and even mocked her glow. But Amelie stayed calm, just like she always did. She had learned how to carry herself with peace, even in the middle of storms. But this day was different, not just because of the necklace, but because of what was about to happen. Her supervisor, Mr. Kweku, had never liked her. He always spoke to her as if she was less than everyone else. He never greeted her properly, never said thank you, and acted like she didn't deserve to work there. That morning, something in him snapped. Maybe he didn't like that Amelie looked happy. Maybe he didn't like that she was smiling while he felt small. Or maybe he just needed someone to take his anger out on. Whatever the reason, he walked straight toward her desk with a cold look on his face. The office went quiet as everyone watched. He leaned over and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Who do you think you are?" Amelie looked up, confused but still calm. He didn't wait for her to answer. He reached down, grabbed the ID card hanging around her neck, and ripped it off in one quick move. The plastic snapped, and the silence in the room grew heavier. Gasps filled the air. Then came his words, sharp and heavy. "Know your place, Amelie." For a second, everything stopped. Amelie sat there frozen, holding the broken strap of her ID. Her eyes didn't tear up. Her hands didn't shake. She just looked at him, silent, strong. The others watched, some in shock, some pretending to be busy, and a few even smirking like they agreed with him. He turned around, proud of himself, thinking he had put her in her place. But what he didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Amelie slowly stood up from her chair. She didn't say anything. She didn't raise her voice or argue. She simply placed the broken ID on her desk and fixed her necklace gently, as if nothing had happened. Her silence said more than any words could. The room stayed quiet, heavy with tension, as everyone waited to see what she would do. But Amelie didn't need to do anything. Her moment was already coming. The gold on her neck wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a promise, a sign that change was on its way. And the man who had just tried to embarrass her in front of everyone had no idea what kind of power was walking into that building any minute. The final insult had been given. And now, the final chapter was about to begin. Only minutes after the silence settled in the office, something unusual happened. Everyone was still whispering about what had just happened, how Amelie's ID badge was torn right off her neck, how her boss embarrassed her in front of the whole office. Some were still laughing quietly. Others pretended not to care. Amelie had gone back to her seat without saying a word. Her face was calm, but her silence felt louder than anything in the room. Then, without warning, the sound of car engines filled the front of the building. Not just one car, several. A convoy of shiny black vehicles pulled up outside, the kind people only saw in movies or when very important guests arrived. The staff rushed to the windows, curious. Even the manager peeked out. The cars were sleek, expensive, clearly something serious. A few security guards came first, then a tall man stepped out of the biggest car. He wore a designer suit that fit him perfectly. His shoes shined. His face was confident, calm, and powerful. Everything about him said he was someone important. He walked straight into the building with purpose, his eyes scanning the room. The receptionist at the front tried to greet him, but he walked past her without slowing down. Everyone froze. No one knew who he was or what he was doing there. The office was silent. Then he spoke. His voice was deep, smooth, and clear. "Where is Amelie?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. People turned to stare at her. Amelie, still seated, slowly stood up. Her eyes met his, but she said nothing. He smiled gently and walked toward her. The room felt like it stopped breathing. One of her coworkers whispered, "Wait, is that her boyfriend?" Or. The man finally reached her and without hesitation, took her hand softly and kissed it. "I hope they didn't treat you too badly, my love," he said. The entire room gasped. Amelie's supervisor stepped back, suddenly pale. A few people dropped what they were holding. The man turned to face everyone, but especially the supervisor. "I'm buying this company," he said simply. "And today, I'm making some big changes." No one spoke. No one could move. The people who had laughed at Amelie just minutes earlier now stood frozen with fear. The same woman they called the Decoration was married to the man now standing in charge. The same woman they mocked for her second-hand shoes was now about to be the boss's wife. The simple gold necklace. It was not just jewelry. It was a quiet message, a warning they had ignored. Amelie didn't need to say anything. Her husband had said enough. And with just one sentence, everything changed. The workers who once mocked her now looked at her with wide eyes. Some even looked down, too ashamed to meet her gaze. But Amelie didn't look angry. She just looked peaceful, like she had been waiting for this moment all along. The room was frozen. No one moved, no one blinked. The man in the sharp designer suit stood beside Emily, holding her hand gently like she was the most important person in the room. Just moments ago, people were laughing at her, mocking her necklace, calling her names. Now, they stood speechless. Her co-workers stared, eyes wide and mouths slightly open. Some looked at each other, trying to understand what was happening. Was this real? Was this quiet Emily, who they called the Decoration, really married to this powerful man? He didn't speak loudly, but his voice filled the room. Calm. Clear. Dangerous. I'm buying the company, he said, pausing to look around the office. And I'm firing a few pests. That one sentence hit like a storm. Some people gasped. Others looked straight at the floor, pretending not to hear. But everyone knew exactly what he meant. The ones who had mocked Emily the most, the ones who laughed the loudest, suddenly looked like they wanted to disappear. Her supervisor, the same man who had ripped off her ID badge just minutes ago, stepped back, his face turning red. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Emily didn't smile. She didn't laugh. She didn't need to. Her silence was enough. She stood tall, her hand still held gently by the man beside her. Her glow was real now, and no one could deny it. People who once ignored her now looked at her with respect, and fear. Her husband turned back to her, brushed a small bit of dust from her shoulder, and whispered something only she could hear. She nodded softly. One of the co-workers tried to speak. Emily. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean, but she didn't even look at them. The same people who used to walk past her like she was invisible now looked desperate to be seen. They tried to smile, tried to act like they had always liked her. But it was too late. Emily wasn't just the receptionist anymore. She was the woman who had kept quiet while everyone else showed who they truly were. Security entered the room quietly, waiting for instructions. The man pointed at 3 workers without hesitation. Them. Out. Now. The guards moved quickly. There was no shouting, no arguments. Just silence. Cold, heavy silence. The people who had made Emily's days at work miserable were now being led out of the building like they were nothing. The others stayed still, not daring to speak or breathe too loudly. As her husband gently placed a hand on her back and guided her toward the elevator, Emily turned slightly to face the office. She didn't say much. Just one word. Security. That was it. The same quiet voice they once ignored now carried power. Real power. And everyone knew, in that moment, that they had judged her far too quickly. They had looked at her clothes, her silence, her shoes, but they never saw her strength. And now, they never would forget it. The very next morning, everything in the office felt different. The air was heavy, and people walked carefully, whispering in corners. No one laughed like before. No one dared to mock. The receptionist's desk sat empty, but Emily was still in the building. Only now, she was not answering phones or organizing files. She was upstairs, in the top office. The one with the glass walls and the view of the whole city. The office that used to belong to the company's former owner, now belonged to her. Emily, the same woman they laughed at, the same one they called the Decoration, now sat in the chair that made the decisions. Downstairs, her former co-workers were panicking. They knew what they had done. They remembered every word, every cruel laugh, every spilled drink. Now, all of it was rushing back like a nightmare. One by one, they tried to speak to her. They wrote emails, sent messages, even waited outside her new office door. Emily, please. I didn't mean it, one said. You know I was only joking, another begged. But she didn't respond. Then finally, the door opened. Emily stood there, calm and graceful. The same soft eyes, the same quiet presence, but now, she held power. They looked at her, hoping for forgiveness, for just one kind word. She looked at them for a moment, then simply said, "Security." That one word was quiet, but it shook the room. As the guard stepped forward, the begging stopped. Amelie turned and walked back into her office without looking back. And just like that, the circle was complete. The girl they had once pushed down now stood above them all, with dignity, strength, and silence more powerful than any voice.